1407 France. Do you guys want to talk about Magonia?
Do we jump in too fast, Dad?
No, we're good. Let's fly on over, plant those seeds, and harvest what we got.
There's no need talking about consensus reality today, because that doesn't make any sense. But this makes more sense. We could even go back further, but let's go to Magonia itself. I have so many notes. I'm missing like the main story of Magonia right here, but we're gonna get.
I think it has something to do with weather wizards. I'd have to say, I previously to us talking about this, I had no idea what the hell that was. So
yeah. So it's so the story is that of these. So there are these people in a village, and there's a bishop that's overseeing these people in this village. He's writing this story. It's the one story that all of Magonia by that name goes back to. And he's writing this thing, his frustration of these townsfolk that aren't tithing properly, jerks.
Of course.
And,
gotta tithe.
And the reason they're not tithing properly, according to this writing, is because they've been paying off these Tempestari, these wizards that work with these sky wizards or sky beings that live in this place called Magonia. The people in Magonia, they want root crops to make their pancakes. I'll come back to that. You can make some interesting pancakes out of like carrots and sweet potatoes and things like that. Probably any root crop you can mash up and cook. You can.
So is this tied?
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, is this tied into the origin of the pancake? Is that where we're going?
Let's not get ahead or behind of ourselves, because we'll get even more confused. But so these sky wizards want root crops, and the obvious reason is because you can't plant much in the sky when it comes to root crops. I mean, you have access to the sun. You can do like a lot of you could do like potted vegetable gardens in the sky, but not much in the way of like ones that really will get that terroir. And I do think this is happening in France, so I had to mispronounce the French word right in the beginning. They're paying off these wizards because the wizards are they're making deals with these people in the sky to keep storms from happening that are destroying their crops, and that's going to help them out to make some money, which they then use to pay off these wizards. And you see how this economy's working. It's not good for the church. But these people wind up getting 4 individuals, I believe it's 3 men and 1 woman, and they put them in a cage, and they're gonna stone them because they're like, these MFers are Magonian people. They're Magonians. They fell to the earth from the sky. Anyway, so they have these guys and a girl in a cage, and the bishop comes to stop them from killing them because they say they're from this sky realm. I don't know what their evidence was. They could successfully build a bridge out of them, or they weighed the same as a duck. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how they figured it out.
Well, I mean, like, here's like a weird thing. It's like, did they saw them like come from the sky, or like, I don't know, maybe they were like working on a roof or something, and they were like, they must have come from the sky. Like, it's like, I mean, like, or maybe like,
they look like those characters in the Timothy Lynch or the David Lynch.
Before I don't want to propose. Yeah, I don't want to propose. Get too far ahead of things, but like, do you think maybe
they don't kill these people? By the way, anyone that's in suspense, they're okay.
Yeah. It's like, well, now you ruined it. So do you think maybe that these people showed up in order to like saying like this was a scam that was basically happening in a bunch of villages, like a bunch of villages weren't paying tithing, right? And this particular village, maybe these people showed up and they were just like, yeah, pay the Magonian protection money, and those people were like, no. They just they locked him in jail, like they like, and then they just were like, yeah, we caught them, it's like they just because that was like they were just running a Magonian scam. Like, I mean, maybe they were Magonian.
That old Magonian scam.
Yeah, it's like
so racketeering that goes back to like the 1300s, and it doesn't originate with humans, is what you're saying.
I finally got a date, by the way. This is 815. This is 815. This goes.
Well,
back
I mean,
to.
I imagine racketeering goes back before the Common Era, but that's. I think there's a little place called Rome, and I'm sure there was lots of racketeering happening there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So So, but in this case, so the bishop shows up and he's like, yo, no, you're not going to kill these people. These are normal people. They need to tithe. Is what all that's needed here is they need to tithe, and so do you, for trying to, God's very upset with you for trying to kill these people. And so they send them on their way. And that's Magonia. Okay, that's the one thing that's... Now, Magonia is supposed to be...
Well, you didn't talk about the Cloudships, specifically,
Well, we're going to talk more about Cloudships because they're associated with Magonia-like places, but not necessarily by that name. But it's basically the same thing. Okay, so the Magonians get around on these Cloudships that are basically like what we would think of as like kind of similar to like airships. Like if you think about how they're rendered in like steampunk stuff or in some of the earlier Final Fantasy stuff, or they're basically, or Mario Brothers, they're boats that float in the sky. And we've got one in the year 1211. It's called and there's a little confusion over the names on this. I'll have to get some clarification. Folks, you know how it rocks. Go into the comments. We're talking about the skies above, but go into the comments below and leave us your wisdom. You're smarter than us. Well, than me. I won't speak for these two. The Cloera church incident, also known as the Clonmacnois. You've heard me do this. If not, check out our previous stuff. Can't promise it's better. Hopefully our future stuff is. Yeah, because it's Ireland. It certainly looks like a French word to mispronounce. But Cloera, I believe, is the Irish word.
So
There's
this was up in Ireland.
In Ireland.
Okay.
A ship going through the sky like a boat. Okay? Going through the sky like with an anchor that gets caught on the church. And people see this going on because, like, church itself sucks. They're hanging out outside. So they're like, oh man, I've heard this homily before. This just goes on. Let's go out and catch a smoke. And here's this boat, and an anchor gets caught on it, and somebody swims down to try to free the anchor, and people interfere and interact with this character somehow. I don't know if they climb up on the roof somehow, very small church. Cue on the roof music. Oh, we don't have the copyright access to that. And they try to, I guess they're trying to get these people or free the anchor. At which point the guy goes, I'm drowning. And then some clergy member comes out. If I'm mistelling this is just how these stories go, people. Some clergy member comes out and says, let that guy go. And then the guy floats up back into the boat and then, I believe, cuts the anchor and leaves. Now, I say I believe cuts the anchor because there are like several tellings of this story. It's associated at least with two places, Cloera, that might be the one in Ireland, Clonmacnois, which might not be based on that name. But it's the same basic story. And sometimes the anchor is remade into the metal hardware of the church, maybe the doors. And but you've got this story. And you've got many stories of boats and sky sailors and people swimming through the sky as though it is water. And it just goes on for a while. Like,
let me interrupt for just 1 second.
Please.
This place in Ireland, and I don't remember which episode we talked about it. And names. Names are like the worst part of my brain. Like, names are crap for me. I cannot remember names for anything.
So the name is just such a strange part of the brain.
It is.
But yeah.
So Timmy, this is what I think. The episode we talked about, there's a place in Ireland, I believe it was a church, burned down or caught fire. I think it was a Hellhounds episode, okay?
Uh-huh.
Is that the same general area as either of these places in Ireland? Do you know off the top of your head? Or are they like completely separated by vast distances?
I feel like there's the church that burns down and has all the zombies associated with it. And there's a wizard and all that stuff. That one is Boleskine House, which I believe is now open for tours. I think they finished the reconstruction. So don't burn it down. Nobody do it, okay?
So the question
jet
is,
fuel is ever available again, then maybe I'll get to visit it.
So the question is it close to Boleskine House? Do you know, like this area, or you're not sure?
Boleskine House is right off of Loch Ness. Yeah, so it's definitely not right near it, but geographically speaking, kind of close. Yeah, so this thing about people swimming through the sky. There's a 17th century story of these air sailors in England. Thanks for not giving me a name on that AI. It's so stupid.
Just make one up. That's what I do all the time.
Yeah. There's an airship. Okay, so they're the ones that look like boats. Okay, and there's swimmers through the sky. Okay, and that's like appropriate to the technology people would have been familiar with at the time. Okay, I'm gonna come back to that. Okay, because we've got this airship wave in the United States in the 1896, 1897. They look like cigars, dirigibles. They've got propellers on them. Okay, so they're like blimps. Blimps that like dirigibles. That's very similar. I believe there's a minor distinction.
Zeppelins.
Of course, I don't know what it is. Yeah, exactly. Like these kinds of things. Okay, they're basically some kind of balloon type thing and a basket attached, but not balloons. They've got propellers on them. Help us out, either of you folks, if you're faster on it, or anyone in the chat. In the chat, because this is totally live. Go ahead and let us know in the comments the big differences, and when were airships really a thing? And I mean, when were blimps like a real thing?
You mean post the golden age of ballooning, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But these things just showing up, hovering around, moving silently.
Which I believe ballooning starts in France. So there you go. Maybe.
Yeah. Connection.
Maybe Magonians are just the Wizard of Oz. They got blown off course.
Also, like the most diabolical of like grimoire stuff and everything. Also, France. So I think there's a connection here.
So could have balloon wizards, is what you're saying. Like again, like I said, Wizard of Oz, balloon. He's a wizard. Coincidence, you know.
Yeah, and they're all these
and a con artist.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is like, so all this stuff goes throughout time, and you've got all the way back to like Anunnaki, which is like this Sumerian kind of idea, and people are gonna be like, you're smearing it all over the place. It's like, well, kind of, but again, we'll come back to it. And then you've got these things. Oftentimes, the technology is like right off of what people understand, but it's doing things that don't make sense. Okay, so I want you all to think about the leprechauns. Now they're kind of wearing clothes like people, but the size is all wrong. They're all falling off. But they're also supposed to be cobblers, and like it's way harder to make a leather shoe than it is to make a shirt. And I can't make either, but am I wrong? Come on. Cobblers and seamstresses, duke it out in the comments. These parasitic algorithms love that stuff, I think. And then make friends. Come on. How many of us are there out there that are interested in this weird stuff? Not enough. Tell your friends about us. Tell them to subscribe. And you subscribe for all the benefits this brings. But anyway, in the United States, seeing these things that are cigar-shaped, hovering around, sometimes they've got propellers and things like that. Alexander Hamilton sees one, and people talk about, well, Alexander Hamilton saw one. It's real. Not the same Alexander Hamilton. He died like 100 years before.
Hamilton? Yeah, pretty sure.
But that's how these things get all messed up. People are like, Alexander Hamilton saw one, and it was in the papers. It's like, well, yeah, but like, no, not that Alexander Hamilton. And these are the papers that, you know, at that point, you know, 100 years also after like Ben Franklin and stuff, who was involved in the papers. Oftentimes, though, these things, they have technology that just doesn't make sense. Like, we all know that intelligent beings in the sky wouldn't build boats, right? Like to float around in, because now we know a little thing about boats and how they work and how the sky works, and that it's not water because we've allegedly been up there. You know, I'm not almost to spoil any kind of future things about the firmament or the flatness or the lack thereof of this great Earth. So I don't think we'll probably get into any of that stuff. But that being said, oftentimes the technology is like just out of reach, and like just convincing enough. And there are enough similarities between Fae encounters and encounters with Magonians and encounters with space aliens, extraterrestrial space aliens, or otherwise creatures maybe from a different time that is not ours, visiting from some place or time. And they often do these weird things that just don't make sense. Things that almost seem to have a more of a metaphorical or symbolic quality to them, or some kind of disguise that's just a little bit off.
But wait,
despite the fact that they seem to be this very advanced magical-ish kind of stock doing these kinds of things that they shouldn't be able to do.
What we do know about the Magonians is they were straight up like at least according to the like local legend, were basically pirates, like thieves. Like they were out to use their weather magic, right, to steal crops, or like you said,
by colluding with earthly people to summon them or something. Yeah, like there's some kind of collusion. They had something to do with these earth people. Why did they need the earth people?
The one thing I saw, though, there was like something like they would use
make sure they're ready.
They would use the storms to like mask or something like that. Like one thing I had read was something like they use storms to like knock down parts of the crops and then mask their like coming to like steal the crops. And it's like, I don't know. That's a weird like. Yeah. Apparently, like, so apparently they're kind of just they're vaguely, however it is, like there's some kind of they're running some kind of like. Like, you know, piracy, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they've got access to the technology to create storms.
But they can't grow food.
Yeah, well, because you need the right kind of medium to grow root crops.
Right. So maybe they're growing maybe they've got some kind of like, I don't know, up in their Cloudships have some kind of, I don't know, they can grow like lettuce or something, you know? So you got some water
it's easier
vapor.
To grow leaf crops. But they're not, leaf crops are not as calorically dense as root crops.
They're hydroponic, yeah, like they're doing now.
Possibly, right? Yeah, vertical farming and stuff like that. But then, what does that do for your roots? Not much. What about you all and these sky visitors? Have you anything you all want to throw in yet before we continue on to talk about how they talk about Jacques Vallée and Passport to Magonia and his comparisons to the Fae and things like that?
There doesn't seem to be any really other parallel kind of thing. Like there's other sky stuff in like folklore or religions and things like that, but like, you know, but they're usually like places or they're like another realm, right? You know, that just like you kind of get there via the sky or something. Like there isn't like a lot of like, but those are like sort of like fixed, well, for lack of a better term, like fixed points, you know, they're like a place, you know, like, oh, it's a sky palace or it's a thing. And I mean, you know, it's like, it's whatever, house of the sky. It's where are the, you know, like the souls live up in this sky realm, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I believe Magonia itself is supposed to be some kind of a city or realm up there.
But it doesn't seem like, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of cloud ship things coming in, like, and doing this specific type of behavior, like wizards, you know, on Cloudships.
Yeah,
it's
like
kind
not
of
this
like
specific
it's
type
very
of thing, but there are weird kinds of parallels between this and other things, and that's one of the things that makes Magonia itself interesting, and probably why Jacques Vallée named his book Passport to Magonia itself, is that it blends this weird.
Was he from a region that kind of? I mean, Jacques Vallée? Was he from
He's French.
But yeah, I wonder if he also is specifically from like the area where they believed in this Magonia stuff or close to it.
I don't know. He's still around. I think. I don't know if he's still publishing or not, but he's got a ton of stuff out there, which makes this kind of thing actually like really difficult because like you got to read a lot. You got to read a lot to like wrap your head around his main points. So I'm always going to be missing some of them because I haven't read nearly enough to really talk about him himself. But one of the things is like, so you've got this similarity between. One of the things in the Magonia story is you've got, first of all, were these people just normal people? Like, how big was the town that they didn't know who these people were? Like, no one knew who they were? Who were they? You know, because sometimes you do have stories of, like, these, like, wild man type encounters. There was one I was trying to find. A lot of times these things happen on farms. I'd be interested in your ideas on why. Now, some people would say, well, looks like a good place to land, you know? But also then you've got like the USO thing, like the unidentified submerged objects that come out of the water that look like craft, that have blinking lights, like UFOs. But do they just look like that because that's what we think they look like? And that's like a theme that is couched in Vallée's stuff, is that like, a lot of times it's these things that are just on the edge of believability, but they kind of don't make sense. Let me tell you the story about this one farmer. And this is the one I couldn't find. There's another story about a farmer later that I'll tie back to my little pancake theme. This farmer goes out into their field and they encounter something out there that I believe is like I can't remember if it's like an airship type craft or if it's a UFO, or they saw something out there that led them out there, and they encounter this person out there that is dirty. They're wearing clothing that's a little outdated, and they're carrying what looks like a musket that doesn't appear like it would work. If I remember, in the telling of the story, that detail is included. It doesn't look like it would work, and I was curious about more details on that. Like, did it look like it wasn't quite right? Like it was made to, like someone made a prop of what a musket was supposed to look like, but it wasn't quite right. But this was like in like the 1800s or something like that. This wasn't, I want to say like it was like a musket was like an outdated, so it might have even been the 20th century, because I feel like in the telling, a musket was an outdated thing to be carrying for like somebody that came from the sky. They wouldn't have this antiquated kind of weapon.
Well, depending when it is in the 1800s, so like, you know, the more you get to the, you know,
like Civil War era, by then you've got
post Civil War. I mean, you have rifling.
Yeah.
Start having people carrying, like, you know, you have like firearms. Like, you're getting away from like the, you know, black powdered kind of deal. You know, like pistols. You know, you have charge. You know, like you have already like basically charges that you would use the ready-made, you know, for your guns. Like there'd be like more, you know, modern kind of actual like bullets, like
yeah.
That's not just balls.
Or even imagine this, where it was suppose that it wasn't a musket at all, something like incredibly more advanced that they're just relating it. Almost like if you had, imagine a laptop from the early 90s, and you happen to stumble across an iPad with one of those keyboards that you can dock to it. If it were separated, you might be like, whoa, it's a laptop, but it was clearly broken. The keyboard was separated from the screen.
Right,
but it's not. It's something more advanced, and that's just kind of how you're relating it.
Well, and so that's one of the things, right? So if we go back, let's go all the way back to like...
Maybe he was a Revolutionary War cosplayer, like he got lost or something. Like, yeah. He was like, I'm lost in the woods. He's like, you have a musket.
In the middle of someone's... lost in the middle of someone's field.
Yeah.
And they got there by some craft in the sky.
They got lost, you know. They were out there. They lost their troop, you know.
Well, let's go back to a similar idea, though, the Cloera church incident, the one where the anchor gets stuck and you have the sky swimmers and stuff. So if you reach for the same explanation and you say, well, they were describing it as a boat because boats are what they knew. Yeah, but they would say, like, let's say it was, but no. But what it really was, everybody, was a UFO, a space alien, and for some reason there was one of them was doing something that people could confuse with swimming around the thing and saying I'm drowning. but they didn't describe it as being made of metal. They didn't say it was a boat, but it's made of metal. This isn't like pre-Bronze Age. They've seen metal. Like, you know, everyone has seen metal. In fact, metal in a lot of human history was more plentiful than paper. They would write things on metal because it was actually cheaper than paper because paper was so hard to make. So they'd seen metal. Why would they say it's a boat? Do you know what I mean? Like, why would they hallucinate a boat?
Well, so what the heck was the anchor? Like, I mean,
what was the exactly? And that's what I'm saying is like, that's what's like lots of things are strange about it. It's not like it would be less strange if it had blinking lights and alien grays or whatever. Like,
also, if it's so like aliens, but how did they get their anchor stuck on a church? You know, that kind of seems a little bizarre for like, it was like, I'm this advanced intergalactic, I've overcome the laws of physics to be able to travel amongst the stars, and I'm a biological organism that can do that, you know, so it's like, but I got my anchor stuck.
Yeah, like Alf is from light years away or whatever, right? And he crashed into a garage. Yeah, you know, and like you know, like it's.
So this is like, so are we going on the alien
crash into a garage?
The clumsy alien theory, like these hyper advanced clumsy aliens.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And so it's like, all right, so let's go to a weird one. Let's go to should we go to another farmer story? Maybe not yet. Do you have any strange sky stories to share before, or sky people, or sky cities? Anyone want to jump in with anything before I?
What about like, is this like, you know, what is the weird thing with like the wild hunt, right? Like that's
okay,
kind of,
yeah.
There's sky. I mean, like it's sort of sky. Like, I mean, like at least regionally, it's not as far off, and time wise from like you know, when you're dealing with like 800 or so, it's not that far in the past, you know, where it's like, you know, these kinds of ideas would have been wiped out, and you know,
right.
And then there's like, you know, obviously like from that kind of stuff, and like Odin writing stuff that's got, we get Santa Claus, right? He's sky guy.
Sky phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, because literally it is like, you know, like related to kind of, you know, Odin riding his chariot with his reindeer like right through the sky, like it's a big beard guy, you know.
We won't get into the whole like Santa Claus and the Amanita muscaria.
Yeah,
we'll save that for another time.
But just like there's some sky, you know, like variations of possibly taking stuff or delivering things, you know, depending on.
Depending. Exactly. Yeah. We don't have to get into Krampus again, but that's always a fun. And again, here we go. Wild man phenomena. So like that encounter with the Musket person. Okay, that's like, and like the dirty people in tattered things that look like they wandered out of wherever. Like, but then like they arrive in a strange way, or they disappear suddenly, or they claim to be from somewhere else. You know, like that kind of stuff. It's very associated with the wild man stories and Bigfoot.
Well, I guess you were going to go into like Sumeria, like you know,
the Anunnaki.
In Kidu is a wild man from the legend of, you know, from
covered in hair,
Gilgamesh.
Right? Yeah,
he's Gilgamesh's, you know, companion, but he comes out and he's a crazy like hairy wild man, you know. So like
exactly. They have these divine assemblies. Hanging out in the sky, the Anunnaki. In Inuit legends, we've got these sky cleaners, these cloud cleaners that clean the sky, and they have to do with like the weather and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think about associations with weird weather phenomena and UFOs themselves, like, and I mean spacecraft type. I know when we talked about crop circles, there were some associations with that, like weird storms, and then here are these crop circles that are left behind. Yeah, the Anunnaki are this weird kind of thing. They're both kind of deities. They're kind of sky deities, but a lot of the symbolism looks like when UFO researchers and things look back, they're kind of like, that kind of doesn't look like what we're used to. That looks more like sky stuff. But there's this ever-present problem of projection when it comes to all this stuff, where it's kind of like, are we seeing what's there, or are we projecting onto it something? Like, are we projecting something onto it that's not quite right because we don't know any better? We projecting something onto it that's not quite right because there's something there and we don't understand it. And something in us is trying to convey something that it's not quite right. It's not quite this, you know?
Well, with the captured Magonians, like, let's round it back, right?
Yeah.
They didn't seem to be weird or anything, according to, like, right? Like, at least a little bit that was
They
written.
were strange to the people who captured them. No one seemed to know who they were.
Does it say how they got captured?
No.
Yeah, because they have just been, like, wandering, merchants or something. Or, like,
And they were
just
dirty.
Okay.
That was like that's another thing that, like, links it up with the
But kind of
wild
wasn't
man stuff.
everything sort of dirty then? I don't know. Well, I mean, like, I just,
Then why would it be noted that they were dirty? I don't know,
that is
you
kind
know?
of weird. Like, it's just like, oh
Yeah.
man, these people are real.
Yeah,
it's like this is not a, like, we're not even, like, it's not a culture that, like, that time period, and
like, we only have the one writing from that bishop,
right.
so it's not like there are, like, other noteworthy investigations.
Yeah, so, like, maybe these people were just, like, people, like, just dirty people that got wandered into town somehow, I guess, got captured, or maybe they were, like, thieves or something.
Well, anyway, this story is associated with this sky realm.
Yeah.
Maybe they were normal people,
Yeah.
or maybe they were wild men. Discuss in the comments, or save it for your monster rating. So, what about the qualities of it that are similar to the UFO stuff? What about the Okay, so in the air, let's go to the airships. Okay, in the U.S., there are stories associated with the airship things in the late 1800s. So this is pre-Wright brothers. Okay, they steal a cow that is then found towns over, parts of the cow, including part that is the hide where it's branded, so they know it was from this farmer that saw the cow taken by the airship. In fact, I think the farmer was this Alexander Hamilton.
No.
That's not the same Alexander Hamilton. And so they have a rope on the cow, and they're trying to hold on to it. And I'm sorry, the ship. Oh, this is very true. Okay, the ship has a rope on the cow that doesn't, and it's trying to pull the cow. And the guy, Alexander Hamilton, cuts the rope. If I'm mistelling this, it's almost better, because this is how these things spread. Cuts the rope, and then he's like, okay, good. Now it can't take my cow. And then it takes the cow anyway. Somehow, like, I guess on its tractor beam. Like, it throws the rope on it to hold it still while it locks the tractor beam on. And then it's got to take it. And then it takes the cow. And then he finds it towns over. He finds some leather, well, what would be leather eventually. He finds its hide, with the brand still on it, and no, the rest of the cow's gone. Now the explanation is obviously that they needed it to go with their root crops.
Well, they were probably making, like, some, like, beef stew or something like that. They needed some, beef, some potatoes, like,
Well,
some
that's
carrots.
it's incomplete otherwise,
Yeah.
And so, and it's hard to raise cattle up in the sky. Contrary to Johnny Cash's, it's hard to catch cattle in the sky.
This is like the
because there
weird
aren't
thing
any
that about
borders.
this kind of stuff, about these things. Like, this person obviously knows what a rope is. This is like, this is the 1800s. Like, he knows what ships are. And he knows what things, like, it's like they have this idea, like, it's.
But this thing,
He knows what probably
cigar-shaped
metal
instead.
ships are. It's like because we're getting into that point where we've had in the Civil
Right.
War metal actual ships, and stuff like that. I mean, like, so there's like, but yeah, okay, it's a cigar shaped.
Well, exactly, right? So now it's more like a submarine
But it's
going
just like
through the sky.
I mean,
Those weren't
it's-
around before,
But
apparently.
it's like, but the whole I think of there is some submarine, like early submarine like tech, coming out of people like I think Revolutionary War. We had like early is almost like a glorified barrel, with like you can put a little charge under a boat with,
Okay.
So there was like people working that stuff, some of that out in submarine. But I don't think they'd call. I don't think most
Yeah,
people.
like it wasn't
know.
in popular consciousness yet.
No,
I mean, like we don't have stories of barrels floating.
Well, not till like Jules, to like 20,000 Leagues and stuff like that,
Right.
But okay, so like, again,
But so like, why the rope?
why the anchor? It's like
could
these
take
guys
it
are
without
thinking,
the rope. Why was the rope there?
Yeah, was it like so? There's just like,
And that's where it's like it's not what it seems to be.
yeah, that's which makes you think like, I don't know, it's.
And like, why would it be in the story other? Like, why put that detail in there if it was just going to take it away otherwise? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's like it doesn't seem like it adds a lot of.
if
It
you're
would
making
actually
up
make
a
it feel
story like that.
less credible. I don't know, or it's just like, or like it's like they were harpooning it, right? Like it was like a rope, but they were really like trying to, I don't know, whatever. Like so it's like because it's like
Yeah.
sky, air, whatever, like water thing. But there's just this thing where I don't know I feel like aliens are more just another variant of folklore, that they're not these kind of like like it's just like if this stuff is weird and this stuff does happen,
Right.
like, but it's all weird stuff that doesn't make sense. It's like this is not high tech in a sense, and this is not like
Yeah.
low tech. Like it's like this is it's like it's high tech in a weird like almost like fantasy sense, but it's like it's not very like things just seem weird. Like people understand and know what things look like. They would like
Yeah.
if it was like a flying saucer, right? Like UFO, like people have seen plates and saucers, they would be able to describe them that way. Like they would know what disc disc shapes are.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, and so
it's
like one of
this
the
kind idea
earliest
of, like,
descriptions. Okay, so we've got the description of these things flying like a saucer, and that I believe is like 1900s. But we also have stories. Where are you? Japanese story of these things that are flying through that are equated with being similar to like terracotta. Well, not terracotta. Anyway, these clay, these Japanese clay dishes. So it's like a similar kind of description of like some kind of a kitchen vessel, some kind of a kitchen vessel, Throwback anyone to Baba Yaga, the mortar and pestle? Mm-hmm. Why is she floating around in that? That doesn't make any sense. People do call shenanigans on the Alexander Hamilton story, by the way. But the idea that these air visitors captured a cow, like it's that early in, like before we have cattle mutilations. Like, I don't think someone was flipping through the old literature and be like, oh, this is a believable one. So like the idea of it mutilating cattle, but then it's kind of like, well, and here I was negligent in my research, believe it or not. I was negligent in my research. I didn't research cattle mutilation itself to see, have these things often been attributed to something supernatural? I know witches get blamed for killing cattle.
Yeah. Also, witches that fly around in the sky.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. Like a lot of it gets associated with these things that come from the sky. Chupacabra kills goats. Chupacabra comes from the sky. Vampires are from, well, they're not from the sky, but they come from the sky. Similar kind of, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm not sure how much of that is just like post Bram Stoker, like turning into bats and things. And it's not just fear of bats, right? Why do these things come from the sky? Why is heaven up in the sky? Why isn't it under the ground? Doesn't it make sense? That's where we bury people. Isn't that where the dead would be?
Well, I mean,
why are they in the sky?
It used to be the case.
Because the sun's there?
It used to be the gods were in the sky, and like the underworld where souls went was in the ground, right? So it's
yeah, like once we invent
and the Fae
but
realm is in the ground, right?
You know why it is? It's the stars.
Yeah,
it's the stars. That's why. Yeah, it's like that's where the ancestors go when they die. Might as well talk about the pancakes on the farms and what's the big reveal I've been waiting for. All right, so 1961, the alien pancake encounter. It's a chicken farmer named Joe Simonton, and this is in Eagle River, Wisconsin. And he witnessed aliens cooking on a grill in their craft. And then he was offered a pancake-like food and later gave it to authorities to test it, who found it was made of buckwheat. And curiously, it contained no salt. I remember that little detail. Yeah, they were about 5 foot tall. They were cooking on a flameless grill, and they handed him this greasy 3-inch perforated pancake. And he said it tasted like cardboard. There are divided opinions on whether you should eat food given to you by strange creatures.
Or strangers in general, probably.
Or strangers in general.
Especially like, so their craft had to be parked and open, or was it like an open air craft if they're grilling? I'm kind of like, I don't understand this guy. Like, he said they saw them in a ship.
Yeah.
But I guess the ship was landed, right? And it was
there was
open.
a silver, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But and they were in the ship grilling? Like,
no, they came out.
They were out of the ship and they brought the grill out, so they were camping. Like, it's like, so basically aliens are just like, what do they call it when you're like camping, but it's really high end camping? You know,
glamping.
Yes.
Yeah. Kinda.
With their buckwheat pancakes.
Some of them. They didn't have bland marshmallows.
They were like, they had a gluten intolerance or something like that. Is that why the buckwheat pancakes, like they were, So.
Yeah, I mean maybe it stores better as a grain.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they don't have those pests. Yeah. Maybe they got it by raiding a field and they didn't have any root crops and they just had buckwheat.
Yeah,
they're like, well, guess we'll mash this into something, roll it out, squash it into a pancake, and
that does seem like a very bizarre.
That's what I mean. Like these things don't make sense.
It doesn't feel very. It feels like alien in no sense, but also it doesn't feel very like. Again, like these none of these stories feel like this like high tech. Intergalactic like type of thing. It feels like very like clumsy, like oh, our ship broke down, oh, we dropped the cow,
yeah, my leprechaun clothes are too big.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's something
my musket isn't something that would actually work.
Yeah.
I came here in a boat. That definitely wouldn't stay up there. Why do these stories contain these stupid ideas? And like part of it is kind of like, maybe it's just stretch. Maybe it's so they're not quite credible. Like, what if the thing is showing up in a way with these incredible things going on, so as to strain the edges of credibility, like so that the story almost can't be believed. What if they are the tall tales? We'll go back to that. The tall tales of all of time. They're here to make it up and spread rumors. But and to get people to argue over whether it really happened. They're here to ruin reputations.
It's kind of bizarre, but it's like reputations of like just normal people that probably didn't have much of a reputation to begin with.
I mean, the thing is, sometimes these things have real life things that happen that are quite sinister, and so that's where it's like some of these are just silly because often because the details are curious. Like I remember there's a story about someone that has a Bigfoot encounter, and like the story begins with like I think they like hear some. No, they don't hear something. They just like they want to see if someone's in this cave, so they fire an arrow into it. And then the arrow flies back. It's like, well, again, it doesn't make sense because nothing is described later as having a bow and arrow to have been able to fire an arrow back. But also, why would that be how you checked if anybody was in there?
Yeah, because like, oh no, like some guy comes out, he has an arrow stuck through. He's like, you shot.
Yeah,
I was just in this cave. Have you heard of spelunking? Like I'm just
like they could have they could have been eating anything, you know. You could have said you just ate the thing. Like, you didn't have to present evidence in a time in history where someone could actually look at it and find out what it is, you know.
Also, it's not like buckwheat pancakes are that bizarre. I mean, it's not a.
I mean,
it's
what's
not like
bizarre is why you would make them, why you wouldn't include salt, and like, did these things include egg or something? Like, how did you bind that together? Were they chicken eggs? I mean, like, it's early for things like.
You did say this guy was a chicken farmer, so maybe they were coming to get some eggs for their pancakes. You know.
Well, I've
You know what? That's very astute of you, Mr. Holmes. That maybe they did need eggs to get everything to stick together, and that's why they were out, because the chickens weren't in the ship.
These are just like the weirdest, like, you know, kind of like, I guess, like, you know, I mean, history is repeat with, like, you know, certain cultures being more, you know, using colonialism to expand their gourmet palates. Maybe this is just another part of that, you know, like, it's like, oh, well, we didn't have these root vegetables on our realm of existence. Let's go over here and steal that. You know, it's like kind of like us with like pineapples. You know, like pineapples are worth like a fortune. You know, back in the like early days of exploration, because they were hard to transport, and they were very kind of rare, and like, you know, it would basically be the equivalent of like buying a house, you know, like it's like, so only the wealthiest people had them, and it's like, but you know, it's like,
and it'll be that way again soon.
Yeah. Now you can get a pineapple for $1, and it's like, you know, 50 if you're lucky.
Not for long. Not for long.
But like, you know, or like coffee, and
you'll have to take an airship to go get one. Yeah.
So they said these guys were like 4 foot or 5 foot or something. How did he describe else how they looked, like this pancake guy? Because this is pretty recent. So
they looked like short, stocky Italians.
Was that what it said? That's what this guy. It's like so. Okay, so rather than what does that mean?
Little
were
green
they wearing
men
like
or grays that were popular in modern in media, right? In modern the tales of the times, because this is like post Roswell and all. He described them as 3 small men who reminded him of short, stocky Italians.
That's a very bizarre, like, and specifically like
their faces were hairless. Although they possessed an intense gaze that made him kind of look away. Like, be ashamed if something happened.
Yeah.
Something happened to your farm.
It's like,
You better give us some eggs for our bland pancake. No, they seem to be kind of nice. They were dressed identically in tight-fitting one-piece tunics, black tunics made of material that looked like jersey. They had no visible buttons or zippers, and included knit-type hats and hoods pulled over their heads, which obscured whether they had hair.
so these guys are just like, they're out
This
there.
is a freaking strange story. That's
So
what
these
I'm
are
talking about.
these are some short guys that
Short,
vaguely
stocky
look
Italians
some kind of like to this
cooking
guy
pancakes
some kind of
on a
European,
flameless grill.
like with like wearing little beanie hats and onesies, essentially, like, you know. So.
Yeah, like
what is it?
why?
Right?
Right?
That's a very strange.
Let's stop with the silly theories of these being made up stories. Okay, let's dispense with all that. All you skeptics, why the hell are you still here? Are you kidding me? Are you still here?
We're here for the short, stocky knit cap guys.
Let's see if they got mentioned. Yeah. All right, so if we dispense with the ideas that these are just made up stories, okay, we've got these things are what they appear to be, or they aren't what they appear to be. Is there something non-physical that can appear physically, hence it's not how it appears? And it purposely looks in a way to try to best approximate something we would understand. Like, so in other words, like, it's like, oh, let me take on a physical appearance. Here we go. That's the best I could do, you know? Or we're encountering something. We don't know what it is. So our brain makes up something, says it's kind of like this. It's something like this. And if it's option 2, is it purposely making it a mismatch? Because it's like, okay, look, no, these are my air quotes, okay? It's not really a boat. It wouldn't be. You know this. You've seen these. You know, it's like, is it putting these weird things in there to let you know this isn't what it really is? These are the air quotes.
If we jump to the assumption like that this is something that's happening, right? Or that something, like you said, something that we don't understand. What if it's like kind of like when, you know, which we're notorious for mispronouncing foreign words. What if it's like somebody trying to speak a language they're unfamiliar with, right? Like in that sense, like, you know, it's like there's, it's like, it's going to come out jumbled. It's going to come out jumbled and it's not going to make sense. Like, it's just like, oh, well, yeah, like this is how this is supposed to look, right? I like, not you thinking it doesn't quite look like a boat. It's like they don't really know what a boat looks like, and they're trying to be like, this is a boat. It's like, right?
That's what I mean with option 1.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, oh, I interact with these people. I'm going to show up. Oh, this is what people wear, right?
Yeah.
But it's a leprechaun, and its clothes are too big, and its features are weird because. No, that's not what people really look like. That's not the right size.
Just doesn't
the clothes
quite get
definitely
it.
are off. You know? Yeah. Is it like an imprecise thing on behalf of the creature? I say creature. Or is it a lack of precision on our part? Is it a perception thing? Is it a projection thing from their side? Is it a how they show up? Or like you said, like the language thing, like they're jumbling the language of showing up in our sensory range, you know? Or is our sensory range just ill-equipped to perceive something there? And so it's making something up, which we know, okay, even if we step back into what we quote unquote know scientifically, I mean that there are certain disorders where this will happen, where people will sometimes it's like literally like there's a blind spot. I believe it might be a problem with the visual cortex, where the blind spot will get filled with this jumbled information that's like not really there, like it hallucinates something. We know that the mind will do that already. So if there's some kind of anomaly out there, can't perceive, will it just fill in the details? Is that what's going on, you know? Or like that, or is it that the other thing, the thing is doing its best to show up in a certain way, or it's purposely showing up in a weird way? So it's like,
just to mess.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, well, I mean, I guess if I would go into the idea of like the trickster-ish kind of vibe that a lot of this, these types of sort of, at least in the pre-UFO phenomenon idea was about, you know, like the leprechauns, the, you know, the goblins, the thing, you know, they're like these kind of like, let's like, like they're there to mess with people in a sense, like, you know, there's like, you know, there's kind of like
and so then it's like, is it like,
why the pancakes?
What's that?
Why the pancakes?
What? And that's the thing. Like, why like this strange element of the story? Like, remember we were talking about like Mothman, and like the wings clearly are not big enough to fly, but that element is there, and it's kind of like, well, why is that strange? Now, like that, you could say, well, because people are like repeating the story, they just don't know that when they're making up the story, you know. But it's those things like, when the pancakes show up, that it's like, or like the rope with the cow. Why would you make up that story? Like, okay, so like some people, it's like the Men in Black, right? Sometimes like Men in Black show up and it's like, well, they're some kind of government people and they're there to scare people from telling the story, the truth about extraterrestrials or the truth about government experiments or whatever. They're there to scare people to keep them quiet. But there are actually instances where like they just don't seem to be human. Like they don't seem to make sense. Like I remember a story I read somewhere about like one of these guys came in and like he had like kind of a strange appearance to him. Like he's kind of weird looking. So he comes in, he's got this strange appearance, and I'm just doing it for the algorithm people. He eats a bowl of jelly, like grape jelly. He just eats a straight up bowl of jelly. And it's like, that's really bizarre behavior. Like, why would you do that? Like, cause like, you know what I would do if I were trying to intimidate somebody? I'd like bring in like a little, like this tiny little baseball bat, you know? Cause it's easy to conceal. Or because I'm only I'm 3 feet tall and I'm one of the stocky Italian type man in black, right? And I'm gonna smash up their china closet. I'm gonna be like, say anything, I'll be back. Right? You intimidate somebody. Like
well, wait, did the person have the bowl?
You don't go into their kitchen and eat a bowl of jelly and be like, you know what? Don't mess with us.
So it's like, did that guy pull jelly out of the fridge and then just?
It was her jelly.
Yeah,
I think it was a woman that he was visiting.
But it's like, you know, but it's like, and they put
right.
jelly just into a bowl. Like that's a weird.
Seems like it.
That
just to further inconvenience the person. They're not just going to eat the whole jar of jelly. They're going to
leave a bowl, like a dirty bowl.
You got to make pancakes out of. You're not going to include any salt. I mean, they put the sugar right into it, so maybe that's what held it together. If that like caramelized.
You said you also had it some kind of oil, like fat.
Yeah.
Hydrogenated fat. So
yeah, well, and that would disperse the heat throughout it too, which would be kind of useful.
They just got those box pancakes where all you have to do is add oil, no egg. You know, it's like that.
I think it's funny, like this idea, this idea of this these earth crops, agricultural and rural products like cattle products and goat products that these sky beings are into. Why? And again, like it's like if you're a farmer, you know when it was killed by a coyote. There's no reason to go making up a story
unless you regionally live somewhere where there's no coyote.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like where it's kind of like a lot of these things. It's like, oh well, no, it's like this. It's this other kind of predator. And it's like, yeah, but like, its blood's drained, and it's like, yeah, well, no, it got mange or something. Like something happened to it. It got shriveled up. Like it's well, you know. So there are these. We haven't gotten into Chupacabra yet, so I'm speaking outside of my
Gotta save that for the Chupacabra episode.
Yeah, but like, but that's kind of the thing where it's like, check in the links for our Chupacabra episode coming soon. Why the sky stuff? Why is it so? Why are the cattle things? This is the question. Well, I'm bringing up Chupacabra. Why are they associated with things that fly instead of things that are on the land? When, like, why add that detail if you're making stuff up? Because we don't know of sky predators that kill cattle. We'd probably know about them by now, you know, unless they weren't from here. And so the Magonia thing. So one idea is there are these beings that are purposely showing up, or we're encountering these beings that are there, and by some other apparatus we're perceiving them, or they're exactly what they appear to be. They just have ways of making those types of things float and things like that. They like their clothes like that. So those are some excellent explanations. Another one is, so there are these beings that are showing up that are like visitors, right? They're visitors. They're here to visit. There's another one that's like, no, there's this reality that we bump into now and then, and when the conditions are right, we just wind up with these strange. When the stars are right, Cthulhu. Not only can Cthulhu wake up, when the stars are right, that we can accidentally walk into like the Fae village or whatever, and that works that way, you know, or that we can otherwise perceive this reality that's already there all the time, you know, but something happens that allows us to perceive it, you know. So there's weird kinds of ways to account for it, but none of them are entirely satisfactory. Nor is just the explanation that all this stuff is just made up, or that it's just made up by dumb people or people that want attention, you know? Because again, like, when you're a cop, how many points does it get you with your fellow rural cops that you're the one with the space alien story? And like, how many points? Okay, so then it's like well, no, you're perceiving something, but you're misinformed. But then like the details that are added in that don't make sense. You know, there's always this something doesn't always jive, including that it's just exactly what it seems to be.
How many let's just like set aside the alien thing. Let's just call this stuff like other stuff, like others or other you know, like your whatever it is, whether it doesn't matter why it happens, right? How many people you think have some more of these weird things and just don't say anything because it would be bizarre? Like, was I dreaming this or did this happen? Like, I don't know. It's just like, it's just interesting.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I'm in like a position where it's like, yeah, like, I don't really feel like my, you know, like reputation as, you know, I don't know, like, a legal counselor go because because I happened to be hiking one day and a bunch of short dudes in black offered me a pancake, you know, like in the middle of like that looked bizarre and yeah, it was weird. Maybe I just don't tell anybody that because that's a little strange, you know. Yeah, or like you said, like yeah, I have some position of authority or something like that. There's nothing to, you know, you lose a lot more than you're going to gain by, you know, driving yourself.
And that's the thing. A lot of times these folks are they're religious and stuff like that. It's not getting them any points, you know. Like when we talk about like ghost story type stuff and things like that. Like it's like it's not winning them any points with the community when they do these kinds of things. If they're making it up, right? And so like it's just baffling. But yeah, so Magonia, and it's we've barely opened a can of worms on this stuff. I wish I did have time to read this novella on the Polish encounter. Oh, we should talk about one more thing, which is there's a guy named Stephen Greer, and they have this thing. He's a contemporary author, I believe, and he there are these things they call CE5 or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Do you know the rundown of the different kinds, you know, like what the encounters are? Do you know them?
First is a visual sighting of a UFO at close range. Second is a UFO encounter that leaves physical evidence. So crop circles and things would be in that category. Burns, broken branches, things like that. Third kind involves the observation of animated beings. So humanoids or aliens.
So our pancake guy.
In or around the UFO. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to interact with them.
Okay.
Fourth kind is being abducted or taken aboard a craft. And fifth kind is direct intentional communication between humans and extraterrestrials. So Stephen Greer and company have a way of, I won't make claims either way. I don't know enough about it. It's called CE5. You can look them up. It's Stephen with a V, as in Victor, or as in a letter in the middle of Stephen. And yeah, CE5 for summoning aliens. Back to our friend Aleister Crowley, since we mentioned Boleskine House earlier, sometimes described some of the beings he encountered as being extraterrestrial, which some people have associated with space aliens specifically, not like elementals or things. And finally, Jack Parsons, I believe the inventor of solid state fuel. Jack Parsons of Jet Propulsion Labs was a Thelemite, a disciple of Aleister Crowley's, and used to, I believe, recite the Hymn of Pan before rocket launches. So, and died under mysterious circumstances. There you go. You thought you were getting one can of worms?
Oh, right. There we go.
Have.
That's gotta love the mysterious.
We gotta get out of here, people. I gotta go meet with the Magonians to give them some carrots. Do you think these things are scary? I think they're weird. I think I'm back to, I've rated exactly the same as I do with the crop circles.
But what are we gonna say? Is this a like weird like if you see a Magonian, would you be freaked out? Like, I guess, or would you be like, yeah, like
I guess it depends what you consider them to be. Okay, let me do it like this. If they're the same thing as Fae, yeah, actually, I do think they're kind of scary because actually they're quite unpredictable. And the effects range anything from grabbing you up and taking you away or killing you, leaving your skin somewhere with the brand visible.
hanging
Or
in trees. No.
yeah, yeah. So that's pretty scary. So since I feel like I should give a monster rating, I'm gonna say that's pretty scary. But since they are Magonian, if they're the same ones that have these pancakes, they can be kept aside with salt. So I'm only going to give them a 4. All right, someone else vote. Everyone that's still here is tired
Come
of
on,
hearing.
Dad. It's cried for too long. Here we go. Wrap up some final thoughts here.
He knows too much inside information about
I do
it.
know too much inside information.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
going to
his
start.
airship is parked outside. I mean, like that's why his background is blurry because the airship's.
Still have to get that insured. So be cool, man. Be cool. I'm going to start right off with the rating. I'm giving this a lowly rating of a 1. To me, this just rings of story. I don't think there is anything to it. It doesn't make sense to me. These beings from the sky, they want potatoes or root vegetables if you want to be a little more generic. It just doesn't make sense. Like, why? It just seems too ridiculous. Like you have these ships that can fly, okay, sail through the air, but you need potatoes. It just seems too ridiculous that they've mastered the art of flying in the sky, but they haven't figured out a way to grow a root vegetable rather in this ship. I think they could figure that out if they had to. I think they could create containers big enough that it could support the root. I don't know. It just. And maybe that's my own ignorance.
Maybe it's because they're above the rain,
Maybe it's my own ignorance, with how, farming works. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense to me. It seems just too ridiculous.
If you did know how farming worked, you'd know that keeping your crop was based on paying off Tempestari. I'm going to sum up what you said in my own words. Okay. You 100% believe the story, but you think the Magonians are doing it because they think it's funny. You only give it 1 monster, not because you don't believe it, because you don't think it's scary when people from Sky Realms, stocky Italians from Sky Realms, come and steal your potatoes. And you also don't think it's scary because you're not terribly into root crops. I can tell. You're skin and bones.
I was going to mention this earlier. I was going to mention this earlier, actually, but I did not. I have 3 possible scenarios, 3 possible explanations for what this really is.
All right.
1, they are in fact extraterrestrials, and this is more of a coming of age moment. Where they have to come to Earth and they have to do something for it's like a dare, kind of.
Yeah, like so it's a frat.
That's explanation number 1.
That's the root crops, the crop circles too. That's a graffiti.
Number two is that they have to dress oddly or present something that's out of character because it's their way of showing like, hey, we're cool, we're all powerful, we can annihilate you, but it's okay. We have this musket that doesn't work. It's cool, we're cool. So that's number 2. And the third one is that it's all just nonsense and people are looking for the 10 minutes of fame.
Yeah. And people drink a lot in the country.
They do.
Yeah, that.
But regardless, 1.
Number 1. One monster.
Yeah, it's like I think. I mean, this is definitely like Magonia itself feels like very, it's a very regional thing, right? It's like to this day. When you get into the thing about the tithing thing, which I didn't know about, like, I wonder if just those villagers just didn't want to pay their tithing and they were making. So, It's like they were just like,
Look, we all got to stick together on this. And the four that were in the cage were the ones that were going to be like, now look, we just got to tithe. They're dirty because they got their Focus kicked.
Yeah, they just like, or they were just like, they were from another like, town. They were like starving because like they gave all their stuff to tithing, and now they had no food for themselves. So they were like, they wandered and like left, and they are. It's like, but I mean, like, yeah, it feels like there's like, and the idea that like they were paying off the beginning, like we don't have this crop because we were paying off the Magonians. It's like
Catholic Church. If you want better representation on our podcast, time for you to pay up.
That was pretty. That was pretty. Pretty. And I don't know how. I mean, like, and like my understanding of like tithing in like especially like medieval times, it's a tax. It's not really like you didn't really get a choice. It's not like, oh, I'm doing this because I love the church and really believe in it. It was kind of like you gotta pay. So there is an element where I feel like,
but it wasn't like that money came out of your paycheck. Like it was kind of like there were records figuring out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it still was like you have to pay up. Like
so you have to claim things and
you have to like show, you have to show like you're giving your
it's like
money.
A compulsory thing is what you're saying rather than
it wasn't it wasn't like kind of like something that in like modern like variations of churches that practice this where it's more of a charitable
put it in an envelope
thing optional kind of
to make
thing.
First communion.
Right. It's like but it so it does feel like there does feel like some kind of like element of like it's pretty convenient to get away from paying your like taxes essentially. In that sense. Now as far as like if I did see a bunch of weird Earth ships or like airships come from the sky, not Earth ships that are on the Earth, but that would be weird, I guess. Like, so if I was trying to like suspend some disbelief, and go into it that way, so I'll give it a 2. I'll square there because like if I were just to go out and see a bunch of like guy throw a rope and steal my cow and like weird guys offering me pancakes, I would probably be just a little weirded out by the whole thing. I would I don't know that I would tell a lot of people about it, but I would definitely be weirded out. But as far as the Magonia thing, I feel like it's definitely more like feels kind of regional and it feels like a way of getting out of stuff. It's like we're explaining like oh no, I didn't have enough crops. I sold more of them because the Magonian stuff. So. It does feel that kind of story. So I'll give it a 2. I'll bump one up above you, Dan, and a little down. Find the middle ground here.
I also want to add real quick, it did not get you out of tithing back then. It will not get you out of taxes now. So don't try it now.
I say try it. Like what?
Well, I would try it if you can do the CE5 stuff where you can.
Well, I think it's called. I think it's a CE5 1040 that you have to fill out if you're going to claim Magonian. Magonian encounters.
That stuff's always changing.
Yeah, it's like you'll still have to pay something, but you'll get at least a bit of a discount. From.
We didn't get to talk about the optical illusions of cities in the sky because we just went everywhere else. There's also a cool little story about like a battle of airships in like the 1500s over Nuremberg. That sounds a lot like a dogfight, and that like to me it's kind of like, was that visions of dogfights in the distant future? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's a cool little story, but there's so much when it comes to sky phenomena. We'll have to make sure next time our topic is like nice and concise and and scary too. But in a scary world out there,
sometimes
it's fun just to have a pancake with weird humanoids in your backyard.